There's a common scenario that many of us experience, but when it happens in Christian circles, there are dynamics that become even more painful and exacerbate why it's painful in the first place. Let's play this out a little bit, okay? Let's say you are talking with someone in your faith community, another Christian believer, whether you're just meeting one on one, you're having a meal with someone, you're at church, you're at an event at church, or you're in a small group, some sort of setting where you're meeting with another person who's a believer. Right off the bat, as a side note, many of us have in mind expectations of what someone else being a believer means about how they're going to show up for us and for other people. There's a set of parameters and beliefs that many of us have that kind of foster a set of expectations in those environments. So that's just kind of a side note. But let's say you're in one of those settings and there's just a casual, "Hey, how are you? It's good to see you." Maybe there's a few more questions and they start to ask that "how are you" with a little more attentiveness, a little more feeling that gives you the feeling that they're really concerned or actually interested in an answer from you. Or in another scenario, you could be in a small group or an event and someone has asked you to share details that tell them more of how you're really, really doing or how you were in the past in another situation. And so the question that starts off with just fine, how are you, starts to go a little bit deeper or really deep in some situations, kind of in opening that door to have a interaction exchange, an interaction between two people that provides connection. Ideally, when we have an opportunity to share the truth and reality of something we're experiencing, even when it's unpleasant, confusing, or something that produces anger, fear, or sadness in us, ideally, we are met with someone who can help us hold that, who can meet us as we're working through the different emotions, the different thoughts, the questions that we have, etc. The common thing for many people to experience is that if they start to open up, they start to be a little bit vulnerable, they start to share, they start to feel a little bit safe, they want to be heard, seen, validated, but they start to share, and what they receive back is advice, correction, maybe questions of, why did you do that? Or why don't you do this? Here's what you should be doing. Or you know what I did in that situation? I think you really need to. Another set of responses that people will hear back may sound like this. Well, at least this didn't happen. At least you know God is bigger than the situation, which can be encouraging in some situations. It's the at least part that I'm focusing on right now. You may hear, as the person who's sharing vulnerably from someone else, why you should be doing what they think you should be doing because it worked for them. There's a dynamic that happens between two people that makes it more difficult for that connection, the design for connection, to actually play out and happen. For someone who's struggling and who already has a message inside of them that they don't really matter or that they aren't worth being seen, worth being heard, worth being loved, even if they don't know that they have that message, it could be in there, deep in the core of who they are, shaping how they live each day. When that is inside of us, and it is in many of us, and someone else basically dismisses or shuts down what we're sharing. Let's say it this way. They shut down what we're sharing. They stop us from sharing any more information, or the emotion in us starts to surface and then it shuts down the emotion. It essentially sends a signal back that strengthens what's already there in that message. I don't matter. My emotions don't matter. My feelings don't matter. What I think about this doesn't matter. Or what's the point? Multiple experiences, especially when they start in childhood or through other significant relationships in our lives, can deeply impact us to the point where we reach this place of more than disappointment. It's like a sense of defeat. It's more than what's wrong with me. It's more than my needs don't matter. It's what's the point? What's the point of ever even asking for my needs to matter? They don't matter so much that I don't even know that I have needs anymore. And as soon as someone starts to shut down the emotion or the experience that we're sharing, it's easy for us to just go along with it. Maybe because we've already shut it down ourselves. It was hard to get out in the first place. But then when we have that experience, it starts to shut it down even more. There's something happening in our bodies, in a part of our brain, in our nervous systems, and in our bodies that is really looking for, can I share the truth of my experience? Can I share the reality that I'm going through or have been through, even if it's confusing, messy, imperfect? Can I be imperfect and still be accepted? Can there be space for my imperfections, my messiness, my confusion, my feeling? Ultimately, it's a message of, can I feel safe? Am I safe with you? Am I safe when I share, when I speak up? And the common experience that we have of someone quickly correcting us or trying to talk about something different, diverting attention to themselves, reinforces that pattern as well. It reinforces a signal in our brain that we're not safe. And in some cases, we truly aren't emotionally safe at all. In some cases, the other person just doesn't know how to respond well. They don't have the skill set. They don't have the capacity at the moment. That's not something they've learned. So it's not always this horrible thing, but it can still be a painful thing or something that adds to pain that's already there, compounds it, and makes it more difficult. And we end up focusing on our behavior. For example, another person is trying to tell us what they think we should do. We may already be trying to think of what we should do. Should. And as Christians, one of the ways that this escalates is that we're already inclined to want to figure it out for ourselves and to try to get it right. This focus on behavior is easier for many of us. And it's also crippling us. It's also destructive and keeps us from being able to have the healing and growth experiences that we need. So my hope and prayer is that we as a church body of believers, that we can continue to learn how to be with one another. We can take in the witness of God that is always present, always available. Even when it seems like he's quiet, his witness is available. And he may be providing something that is strengthening us on the inside to continue forward in faith, trusting that he's there and allowing us to notice that he's sitting in silence with us in challenging moments. Let's go back to the focus on behavior. We are focusing on the external, on what is seen. I think of Samuel when he went out looking for King David. He didn't know he was looking for King David, but he went out because he was supposed to proclaim king, and he is seeking out who God has already decided is going to be king. In his mind, he's thinking the mighty, rough, rugged men are going to be God's chosen person. Someone in the brothers who has these characteristics are going to be the one that God chose. And God chose David. And David was a shepherd boy at the time. He was smaller in stature, not what we would have seen on the outside or noticed on the outside because we're looking at the external. Behavior is similar to that. We're still looking at the external, what we can see, which helps kind of feed our need to focus on what is right and good based on how we see it and determine it. There's so much that we don't see where we have to trust that God is working. And when someone else is struggling, we don't see what's underneath that, what's going on for them. They may not know, and it could take years sometimes in therapy to really know. We don't have to know that information to be able to meet with someone in a way that affects change for them and for us. This focus on what you do is also reinforcing for them a message of, I have to do the right thing in order to get accepted. When someone is able to show up for another person without that expectation of this is what you have to do to show up and be good, they have an opportunity to have a different experience that actually sends a signal to those alarms that are going off in their body that kind of calms those alarms down a little bit. More and more of those experiences bring more calm to nervous system. Another thing about this focus on behavior is that we are using logic. And I'll hear a lot of times in Christian circles that feelings lie to you. And I that's a whole nother topic for another day. I am not a fan of that phrase at all for numerous reasons. I think I have a couple videos out already that talk about feelings and also fear is a liar. And I will be doing more videos on this topic in the future. But there's this focus on you have to be thinking rightly, right? So there's scripture that talks about in Romans 12, being transformed by the renewal of your mind. And that is often talked about with the way that we think and our thoughts, but it's also taught from the perspective of just change the way you think, and then you'll have a different experience, or you could be stronger in your faith, etc. And there's just too much nuance in there that's missed because, yes, having different thoughts affects us because it's connected to our emotions, our experiences, and so much more. But when our focus is on just do this thing, we are also using a part of our brain, the logic part of our brain, to try to reach a logic part of the brain that is missing the heart of where the pain is and how emotions are stored and show up in a body and in the brain. We can't be with someone in that sense of witness. God is with us, Emmanuel, God with us. If our focus is on what they need to do or how to get it right, or trying to figure it out and fix the situation. Sometimes we need that. We need that call to action, and that's where we are. But the pain that's being presented, or the challenge or the confusion that's being shared between two people in community needs witness. And that is not a logic-focused activity. It is something completely different. We can actually feel with another person, but with empathy, understanding what they might be experiencing. We can allow our bodies to simply be in that moment with them, which isn't always comfortable. There's silence, and that silence isn't always comfortable. But if you've shared something that you were struggling with, and you know that pain of trying to open up, and maybe you don't even notice it as pain, maybe just know what it's like to start to feel something strongly and have someone correct you or quickly change the topic or avert attention, you know how easy it is for that to shut down. But guess what? It's still in there. It hasn't processed. It hasn't had a place to go, and you still need a place for it to go. One thing that is beautiful about God being with us all the time is that we can always go to God with our emotions, with our needs, with these thoughts and feelings. All of them. The confusing ones, the imperfect ones, the messy ones. God will be there with us in all of them. One of the reasons I love the Psalms so much is because the Psalms reveal this, reveal the messiness in God's presence with the people who are expressing the psalm, expressing the honest emotion. We see it over and over and over again. God's not trying to connect to our logic part of the brain in those moments. He's with you. Our desire to be known and our fear of being known is a place of witness, a place where that emotional connection and relational connection shifts things. It calms the fear of being known and develops and strengthens the courage that we get from being known. The truth, the reality, that we're imperfect, the messy part. One more thing that happens in spiritual faith communities is, and this happens between the person that maybe we're opening up to, and it happens for us inside our own minds. Because we're so focused on the behavior and the right and good things to do, and because we're so frequently taught that this is the thing you need to do. Pray these verses, you need to forgive and forget, let go and let God, you need to just trust God more, or focus on this list of verses. It's not that those things aren't helpful, because they can be to some regard, but some of those phrases that I said, there's a lot more to say about them. It's not that the spiritual principles aren't helpful at all, but it's the way that we are connected to those spiritual principles and the message that comes through them that actually causes us to feel more shame and badness and reinforces our desire to try to do good. Think of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil in the garden. That is something that we still struggle with today. We have this desire to know good and do good and get the right thing based on our own mind and knowledge here. And we reinforce that when we're saying, just do these spiritual things, and that's supposed to make it all better. But that keeps us disconnected from the way that God wants to be our source at the core of our being, at a spirit and emotional and heart level. And so as believers, many of us have this extra shame that you may be carrying because you've been told you just need to do this. You shouldn't be feeling this. You shouldn't be angry or frustrated, or that sometimes the message comes through that you're the problem when we hear things like, stop harboring resentment. Are you carrying a root of bitterness? Are you doing this? We're looking for all the things that we may be doing right or wrong of the Christian thing. And it's missing the point. It's missing the heart of God and the heart of God's spirit connecting to your spirit, where you're at in that moment, and the deeper need that you have. It literally, like, I almost feel tears in my eyes right now when I just think of how pervasive this is in the church body of believers, how much we need to experience God between each other so that we can experience more of God's goodness in our own lives. And if you don't have that with someone else today, if your social circle has gotten smaller, maybe because you had many of these experiences, remember that you still have a good God who is offering to be with you in the reality of all your experiences. As you continue to experience that, as you have more and more experiences with God where you can be messy and honest, and then your body gets the signal of, oh, he's not gonna send lightning on me and strike me down, etc., you may find yourself more encouraged, more courage, more infused with courage to do something different. For example, you might recognize that some friend circles, they're just not going to get it and they don't care. They can't offer you what you need in that moment. So then you just know that you do have limited room to share and be vulnerable with those people. Okay, that's fine. But if you need deeper connections, you don't have that in your life, you might test the waters with this infused courage. You might test the waters with some people where you're kind of just testing to see, is there room for this? And you might see, how do they respond? And even ask, can you hold space for this without giving me advice right now? Do you have room to hear me work through anger, work through fear, work through sadness, whatever, for a few minutes? That would mean a lot. I really need space to just work through it all. Sometimes I find myself with other people I've asked, can you hold space for me as I just let it out? Because then it drops. This isn't always the case, but there are times when it's not built up for a long time or whatever, and I just need a place to feel heard. That person validates, they affirm that the experience I'm having is my experience, that it's difficult, etc. And then the emotions just, and I feel better. I have more energy, more capacity to do whatever I need to do later in the day. I want that for you. And I hope that you will find new ways of connecting with people and that you will be one of these people, that you will receive what you need so that you have it to give to others. It's one of the things that we build in the Growing You membership community. We explore together how to identify our own needs, relational needs, emotional needs, spiritual needs, to get those needs met in healthy ways, and then to offer those to other people. We practice in our group sometimes, and we start to build that new pattern, way of being with people that I hope will translate to their real life connections in their little circles, big circles, whatever it is where they live. I hope this message has been encouraging, and I I want you to know that there is so much hope, that these experiences are common and unfortunately more common for some people than others. But when you recognize that it's happening, you also have an opportunity to allow that space for yourself. You can choose to give yourself grace and compassion to work through the reality of your own thoughts and feelings. You can maybe ask for that in a social situation, or you can go home, journal it, write, talk to God, talk out loud, take a walk, whatever, to process with God. You can also use Unleash Heart and Soul Care Sheets. My tool, Unleash Sheets, helps people work through things that are happening, the dynamics of what's happening, the real experience, all the thoughts that go with it, the feelings, bring it before God, and continue through a process with God. My hope and prayer is that if you've had these experiences, that you feel a little more seen today, and that you breathe, say, okay, I've had these experiences, but God is with me, and I can choose something in this moment that is helpful for me. I can give myself grace and compassion, and who knows what'll happen in the future. When you've had interactions that have brought disconnection to yourself and disconnection between people, you now have information that helps you to have new interactions and new ways of engaging with other people and with God in the future. If you choose to do this, if you have a new experience and you feel comfortable sharing, just share it in the comments. You could just say, hey, tried it, tested it, great. Tried it, tested it, didn't go good this time, gonna try again. Don't have to give me any details. This is a public space. I don't want you to open yourself up unnecessarily in a space where it isn't fully safe to express all of those things. but find the places and test the waters with people so that you do have that social engagement, that connection with other people, so you can feel seen, heard, valued, and loved. Wishing you all the best. Take care.